Maria Delano walked into the CNN studio with confidence overflowing. At 32, she had become one of the network's rising stars, known for catching tech executives off guard with her sharp questions. Today's assignment excited her more than usual, an interview with Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google. "This is going to be good," she told her producer, Jake, while the makeup artist applied the final touches. "I've done my homework on him." Jake looked worried. "Maria, Pichai isn't your typical tech bro. He's brilliant and extremely well prepared." Maria laughed. "They all think they're brilliant. But trust me, I found some holes in Google's new AI strategy. The viewers will love it when I make him squirm a little." The studio buzzed with activity as cameramen adjusted their equipment and sound technicians checked microphone levels. Maria reviewed her notes one last time. She had spent 3 days researching Google's latest projects, especially their quantum computing claims that seemed too good to be true. At precisely 9:30 a.m., Sundar Pichai walked into the studio. He wasn't what Maria expected. Instead of the arrogant tech titan she had imagined, Pichai was dressed simply in a button-down shirt and jeans. He greeted everyone in the room, from the director to the coffee assistant, with the same warm smile. "Miss Delano, it's a pleasure to meet you," he said, extending his hand. "I enjoy your technology coverage." Maria shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Pichai. I hope you'll still feel that way after our interview." If her comment bothered him, he didn't show it. He just smiled and nodded. As they took their seats under the bright studio lights, Maria felt a flutter of nerves. She pushed it aside. This was just another interview, and Pichai was just another tech executive with fancy promises to sell. "We're live in 5, 4, 3. The floor director counted down silently with fingers for the final 2 seconds. "Good morning, America. I'm Maria Delano, and today we have Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, joining us to discuss the company's latest breakthroughs in technology. Welcome to the show, Mr. Pichai." "Thank you for having me, Maria," Pichai replied with a slight nod. Maria jumped straight in. Google recently announced that its quantum computer completed a calculation in 200 seconds that would take today's most powerful supercomputer 10,000 years. Many experts are calling this claim ridiculous. How do you respond? Pichai didn't seem bothered by her direct approach. "It's actually a fascinating development. What we've achieved is quantum supremacy." "Quantum supremacy," Maria interrupted with a laugh that came out louder than she intended. "That sounds like something from a science fiction movie, not reality." Several crew members glanced at each other nervously. This wasn't the usual respectful tone of the network's interviews. Pichai paused, his expression unchanged. The studio fell silent for a moment that seemed to stretch forever. "May I explain what that means?" he asked politely. "Please do," Maria replied, still wearing a small smirk. She felt in control of the interview, exactly where she wanted to be. What she didn't realize was that her dismissive laugh had been captured perfectly by the cameras. Behind the calm exterior, Pichai's mind was working, not with anger, but with a clear purpose. He reached slowly into his briefcase as he began to speak. "Quantum supremacy is actually a technical term in our field," he said. "And I think I can show you something that might help explain why this breakthrough matters to everyone watching." Maria had no idea that in the next 5 minutes, everything would change, and her confident smirk would vanish completely. The entire studio watched as Sundar Pichai pulled a small tablet from his briefcase. His movements were unhurried, his expression still friendly despite Maria's laugh. "Let me show you something, Maria," he said. "This might help everyone understand what quantum supremacy really means." Maria shifted in her seat. She had expected him to respond with corporate talk or get defensive. Instead, he seemed completely at ease. "I'm sure our viewers would love a simple explanation that doesn't require a PhD," she said, trying to maintain her confident tone. Pichai nodded. "That's exactly what I want to provide." He tapped on his tablet, and suddenly the large screen behind them lit up with a simple image of 2 computers side by side. On the left is a regular computer, even a very powerful one. On the right is our quantum computer. The images were clear and basic. The difference is how they solve problems. Maria glanced at the screen, then back at Pichai. She had prepared technical questions about Google's claims, but she hadn't expected a live demonstration. "Traditional computers think in bits, ones and zeros," Pichai continued. like light switches that are either on or off. But quantum computers use qubits, which can be both on and off at the same time. He touched his tablet again, and the screen showed an animation of light switches versus strange, glowing particles that seemed to flicker between states. That sounds impossible, Maria said, her earlier mockery fading as genuine curiosity took its place. It does sound impossible, Pichai agreed with a smile, but it's actually how the world works at the tiniest level. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. The camera crew, who had been tense after Maria's laugh, now leaned forward, as fascinated as the viewers at home. This is why our quantum computer could solve in 200 seconds what would take a traditional supercomputer 10,000 years. It's not marketing hype, it's physics. Maria's producer spoke into her earpiece. The online viewership is jumping. People are tuning in. Keep this going. Sensing the moment, Maria asked, "Can you prove this claim? Many tech companies make big promises that never come true." Pichai's eyes lit up. "That's a fair question. Actually, I can show you a real example right now." He tapped his tablet again. "We've set up a live connection to our quantum lab. They prepared two problems, one for a regular supercomputer and the same one for our quantum computer." The screen split to show a live feed from a Google lab where researchers waved at the camera. Behind them stood strange-looking equipment covered in cables and cooling systems. The problem is about optimizing delivery routes, something shipping companies deal with every day. With 25 destinations, there are millions of possible routes, but only one best solution. Maria leaned forward despite herself. "And you're going to solve this now? Live?" "Yes," Pichai said. "Let's start the traditional computer first." He nodded to the lab team, who pressed a button. A counter appeared on screen, showing the calculations beginning. While that's running, let's start the quantum computer on the exact same problem. Another button press, and a second counter appeared. The quantum counter raced forward at incredible speed, while the traditional computer's counter barely moved. The studio fell completely silent. The crew forgot about camera angles and sound levels. Maria's mouth opened slightly as she watched the quantum counter flash to completion in just under 3 minutes. "Problem solved," said a researcher from the lab. "Verified optimal route identified." "And the traditional computer?" Pichai asked. "Current estimate is that it will finish in approximately 13 days, the researcher replied. Maria looked at Pichai, her earlier smugness completely gone. "That's remarkable," she said quietly. Pichai nodded. "And this is just the beginning of what quantum computing can do." The dismissive laugh that had echoed through the studio minutes ago now seemed like a distant memory. As the camera zoomed in on Maria's face, viewers could see something they rarely witnessed from the tough reporter: genuine amazement. The studio was silent for a moment as everyone absorbed what they had just witnessed. Maria's producer spoke urgently in her earpiece. "The social media response is exploding. People are sharing clips already. Keep going with this." Maria cleared her throat, trying to regain her professional composure. "That was certainly impressive, Mr. Pichai, but speed isn't everything. What practical applications does this technology have for everyday people?" Sundar Pichai smiled, clearly prepared for this question. "That's exactly the right thing to ask, Maria. Speed alone isn't the point." He tapped his tablet again, and the screen changed to show a series of images: a molecule, weather patterns, and traffic flows in a major city. "Quantum computing will help us solve problems that were simply impossible before. Let me give 3 examples that affect real lives." Maria nodded, now genuinely interested. The camera operators adjusted their angles, sensing they were capturing a remarkable television moment. "First, drug discovery," Pichai said, pointing to the molecule on screen. "Finding new medicines takes years because testing how molecules interact is incredibly complex. Quantum computers can simulate these interactions accurately, potentially cutting development time from years to months." He swiped to the next image. "Second, climate prediction. Current models can't process all the variables that affect our weather and climate. Quantum computing can handle this complexity, helping us predict natural disasters earlier and understand climate change better." As Pichai spoke, Maria noticed something surprising. The man wasn't using technical jargon or complicated language. He was explaining revolutionary science in words anyone could understand. And third, he continued, optimization problems like traffic management. In major cities, millions of cars create countless possible traffic patterns. Quantum computers can calculate the most efficient routes instantly, reducing congestion and pollution. Maria had prepared questions designed to trip him up, but now found herself asking, when will regular people see these benefits? Some within 5 years, Pichai replied. Others will take longer. But we're on the verge of a computing revolution as significant as the internet itself. He paused, then added something unexpected. But technology also brings responsibilities. We need to ensure these powerful tools are used ethically. Maria recognized an opening for a more challenging question. Google has faced criticism for its data collection practices. How can people trust you with even more powerful technology? Instead of becoming defensive, Pichai nodded thoughtfully. That's a crucial question. Trust must be earned. He set his tablet down and leaned forward slightly. We're establishing ethical guidelines with input from experts across many fields, not just technology. We're also working with governments on appropriate regulations. Power like this cannot exist without accountability. His sincerity seemed genuine, catching Maria off guard again. This wasn't the evasive tech CEO she had expected. May I share something personal, Maria? Pichai asked. Please do, she replied, curious where this was going. I grew up in a 2-room apartment in Chennai, India. We didn't have a phone until I was 12. No television until I was 8. Technology changed my life by opening doors to education and opportunity. The studio crew was completely silent, everyone captivated by his story. This drives my belief that technology should solve real problems for people everywhere, not just the privileged few. Quantum computing has the potential to tackle some of humanity's biggest challenges, from diseases to climate change to resource scarcity. Maria realized the interview had transformed into something she hadn't anticipated. Instead of catching Pichai in a gotcha moment, she was participating in a meaningful conversation about the future. We're getting signals that viewers want to call in with questions, her producer said in her earpiece. This never happens for tech segments. Maria looked at Pichai with new respect. It seems your explanation has resonated with our audience. Would you be willing to take some viewer questions about quantum computing? Pichai smiled warmly. I'd be delighted to. As the production assistant began setting up the call-in segment, Maria realized that her dismissive laugh from earlier now seemed not just unprofessional, but uninformed. The interview had just reached its halfway point, but already she knew this would be remembered as one of the most remarkable conversations of her career. We have our first caller on line 1, said Maria, as the production team hurriedly set up the unexpected call-in segment. James from Boston, you're on live with Sundar Pichai. Hello, came an excited voice. Mr. Pichai, I'm a high school science teacher. My students are watching this right now in class. Could you explain how quantum computers are different from the computers we use every day in terms a teenager would understand? Pichai's eyes lit up at the question. That's wonderful that you're watching with your students. Let me try this explanation. He thought for a moment. Imagine you're in a library trying to find a specific book, but there's no catalog system. The studio camera zoomed in as he continued. With a regular computer, you would have to check each book one at a time until you find the right one. If there are millions of books, this takes a very long time. Pichai's hands moved expressively as he spoke. But a quantum computer is like having millions of copies of yourself, each checking a different book simultaneously. You find the answer much faster because you're looking everywhere at once. That's brilliant, the teacher exclaimed. My students are all nodding. Thank you. Maria was impressed. That was an excellent analogy. We have another caller, Susan from Denver. Mr. Pichai, Susan began, I work in medicine. Could quantum computing help with personalized treatment for cancer patients? Absolutely, Pichai replied. Cancer treatment is actually a perfect example. He turned toward a different camera. Each person's cancer is unique, with specific genetic mutations. Finding the right drug combination is incredibly complex. He tapped on his tablet, and the screen behind them showed a simplified DNA strand. Quantum computers could analyze a patient's specific cancer and simulate how thousands of possible drug combinations would interact with it, all in just hours. Doctors could then use the most promising treatments immediately. That's incredible, Susan said, her voice filled with hope. As more callers joined, the show's producer whispered to the director, "We're going to extend this segment. The ratings are through the roof." Maria noticed a shift in the studio atmosphere. The crew members who had earlier exchanged awkward glances after her laugh were now completely engrossed. Even the usually stone-faced camera operators were visibly fascinated. After the fifth caller, Maria decided to push deeper. "Mr. Pichai, these applications sound revolutionary, but also concerning. Could quantum computing break the encryption that protects our banking and personal data?" Instead of avoiding the difficult question, Pichai nodded seriously. "That's a legitimate concern, Maria. Yes, quantum computers could eventually break many of today's encryption methods." A murmur ran through the studio at his directness. "But," he continued, "we're not hiding this fact. Google and other research organizations are already developing quantum-resistant encryption. We're working to solve this problem before it becomes a real threat." "So it's a race against time?" Maria asked. "In some ways, yes," Pichai acknowledged. "But it's a race we're running against ourselves, not against some outside threat, the same people developing." During the commercial break, the studio buzzed with activity. Makeup artists rushed to touch up both Maria and Pichai, while producers huddled nearby, discussing the unexpected direction of the interview. "We've never had viewer numbers spike like this for a tech segment," Maria's producer Jake whispered to her. "The network president just called. He wants you to keep this going as long as possible." Maria nodded, feeling a mix of emotions. She had prepared for a confrontational interview, but now found herself in the middle of something much more valuable. As the makeup artist stepped away, she turned to Pichai. "I owe you an apology for laughing earlier," she said quietly, away from the microphones. Pichai shook his head. "No apology needed. Skepticism is healthy in journalism. Without it, who would hold companies like ours accountable?" His gracious response only made Maria feel more embarrassed about her earlier behavior. 30 seconds to air, called the floor director. As the cameras prepared to roll again, Maria decided to take the interview in a more personal direction. When the red light came on, she smiled at the camera. "Welcome back to our special extended segment with Google CEO Sundar Pichai. Mr. Pichai, you mentioned growing up without much technology in India. How did that experience shape your vision for Google?" Pichai settled back in his chair, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "My childhood gave me perspective on what technology means to people who don't have easy access to it," he began. "When my family finally got our first telephone, it changed everything. Suddenly, we were connected to the world in a way we never had been before." The studio was completely silent as he continued. "I remember my father, who worked at an electrical component factory, saved for 3 years to buy that phone. It wasn't just a device to us. It was a portal to possibilities." The camera zoomed in on Pichai's face as his eyes grew distant with memory. "Years later, when I first used the internet at Stanford, I had that same feeling of worlds opening up. That's what drives me at Google, making useful technology accessible to everyone, not just the privileged few." Maria nodded. "That's quite different from how tech leaders are often portrayed. The stereotype of the tech CEO is someone who's been coding since childhood and had every advantage," Pichai acknowledged. "My path was different. I didn't even use a computer regularly until college." "What was that transition like?" Maria asked, genuinely curious now. "Challenging but eye-opening," he replied. "I realized that technology isn't just for people who grow up with it. Sometimes, those who experience its transformative power later have the strongest appreciation for its potential." A production assistant handed Maria a note. She glanced at it and smiled. "We've received thousands of viewer questions in the past few minutes. One that keeps coming up is about education. Melissa from Atlanta asks, how can schools prepare children for a world with quantum computers when many teachers don't understand the technology themselves?" Pichai leaned forward, clearly passionate about this topic. "That's a profound question, Maria. The truth is, no one person understands everything about quantum computing, not even our top scientists. The field is too new and complex." He paused to gather his thoughts. "What we need to teach children isn't just technical knowledge, which will change anyway. We need to teach them how to think, how to approach complex problems, work collaboratively, and adapt to new information." So it's about thinking skills rather than specific technology skills? Maria asked. Exactly. Critical thinking, creativity, and curiosity are the foundations. Technical skills can be learned later, but those fundamental abilities are harder to develop as adults. As Pichai spoke, Maria noticed something remarkable. The same man who had calmly demonstrated cutting-edge quantum computing was now speaking with equal passion about children's education. His technical brilliance had initially captured everyone's attention, but it was his humanity that was now holding it. We've created a free curriculum called CS First that teaches computer science fundamentals to kids, Pichai continued. Not because we expect them all to become programmers, but because these thinking skills help in every field. The interview had transformed completely. What began with a dismissive laugh had evolved into a thoughtful conversation about technology's role in human potential, exactly the kind of discussion Maria had always wanted to facilitate but rarely achieved. We'll be right back with more after this short break, Maria said to the camera, though she was already thinking about the questions she wanted to ask next. As the interview continued after the commercial break, Maria noticed a change in the atmosphere. The initial tension had completely dissolved. The production team, who usually shuffled restlessly during long segments, stood transfixed. Even the normally impatient director hadn't sent a single hurry-up signal. Mr. Pichai, we've discussed the technical aspects of quantum computing and your personal journey, Maria said, but many viewers are asking about privacy concerns. With more powerful computers, are we heading toward a world with even less privacy? Pichai nodded thoughtfully. It's the most important question facing tech companies today. He set his tablet down and leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped together. Let me be direct. Powerful technology without strong privacy protections is dangerous. At Google, we're investing billions in privacy research alongside our computing advances. But Google's business model depends on user data, Maria countered, finding her journalistic edge again. Isn't that a fundamental conflict? The studio crew tensed, expecting corporate defensiveness. Instead, Pichai surprised everyone again. That's a fair challenge, he acknowledged. Our original model did rely heavily on data collection, but we're evolving. He paused, choosing his words carefully. We're developing new approaches that keep personal data on your device rather than our servers. We call it on-device processing. Can you explain that in simpler terms? Maria asked. Of course. Imagine your phone recognizing your photos without sending them to Google. Your data stays with you, but you still get helpful features. Maria pressed further. But is that enough? Many people feel tech companies have already collected too much information. Instead of becoming defensive, Pichai nodded. I understand that concern. Trust is easy to lose and hard to rebuild. He looked directly at the camera, speaking now to the viewers. We're working on tools that give you more control over data we've already collected, including easier ways to delete it or limit how it's used. And you believe people will trust Google to keep these promises? Maria asked. Trust isn't something you can demand, Pichai replied. It must be earned through consistent actions over time. We've made mistakes in the past, and will likely make more in the future. What matters is how we respond and learn from them. The honesty of his answer seemed to catch even the studio crew by surprise. Maria checked her notes. Another popular viewer question concerns AI ethics. With quantum computing accelerating AI development, many people are worried about the risks. Pichai's expression grew serious. Those concerns are valid. AI combined with quantum computing will be incredibly powerful, too powerful to develop without careful ethical guidelines. What specific steps is Google taking? Maria asked. 3 main approaches, Pichai replied. First, we've established an independent AI ethics board with diverse voices, not just technologists, but philosophers, human rights experts, and social scientists. He counted on his fingers as he continued. Second, we're publishing our research openly so others can evaluate it. And third, we're advocating for thoughtful regulation. You're calling for your own industry to be regulated? Maria asked, surprised. Yes, Pichai said simply. Some technologies are too important to develop without proper oversight. We want to work with governments to create sensible frameworks that promote innovation while preventing harm. A message appeared on Maria's prompter. Ratings breaking records. Extend 10 more minutes. We're going to continue this fascinating conversation a bit longer, Maria announced. Mr. Pichai, throughout this interview, you've shown remarkable patience and thoughtfulness. What would you say to other business leaders about communication style? Pichai smiled. I believe in the power of listening first. Many leaders feel pressure to have all the answers immediately, but often the best response begins with understanding the question behind the question. Maria felt a pang of self-awareness, remembering her dismissive laugh earlier. When someone challenges you or your company, Pichai continued, there's usually a legitimate concern behind it. If you can identify that concern rather than just defending yourself, you create the possibility for real dialogue. As he spoke, Maria realized she was witnessing a masterclass not just in technology, but in leadership and communication. The man she had tried to embarrass was now teaching her audience, and her, about thoughtful engagement with complex issues. We'll take a quick break, Maria said, and return for our final segment with Sundar Pichai. As the show entered its final segment, the production team was buzzing with excitement. The interview had already run twice as long as scheduled, bumping other segments entirely, but nobody was complaining. The ratings were extraordinary. For our closing segment with Google CEO Sundar Pichai, we're trying something different, Maria announced. Mr. Pichai has agreed to answer rapid-fire questions from our social media audience. The screen behind them filled with scrolling comments from viewers. Are you ready? Maria asked with a smile. Let's try it, Pichai replied, looking remarkably relaxed for someone about to face unprepared questions on live television. First question: if quantum computing is so powerful, what prevents it from being used for harmful purposes? Pichai nodded. Great question. 3 safeguards. First, quantum computers require extremely specialized environments. -273 degrees Celsius, near absolute zero. They're not something anyone can build in a garage. Second, we're developing secure access protocols. And third, we're working with security experts worldwide to establish ethical guidelines before the technology matures fully. Next question: will quantum computing make current smartphones obsolete? Not at all, Pichai said. Quantum computers are like special tools for specific problems. Your phone will likely connect to quantum computing power in the cloud for certain tasks, but continue using traditional chips for everyday functions. Think of quantum as an addition, not a replacement. Maria glanced at her producer, who was giving enthusiastic thumbs-up signals. The audience was loving this format. Here's an interesting one. Does Google plan to make quantum computing accessible to small businesses, or will it only be for large corporations? Accessibility is our primary goal, Pichai answered. We're already developing cloud-based quantum services that small businesses can access without buying the hardware. A small medical research lab, for example, could use quantum computing for a few hours to analyze drug interactions, paying only for what they use. Question after question came in, and Pichai handled each one with remarkable clarity. Technical questions, ethical concerns, business inquiries. He addressed them all without hesitation. After the 10th question, Maria's producer spoke in her earpiece. The network president is on the line. He says this is the best tech segment they've ever aired. Ask about the future. Maria nodded slightly. Mr. Pichai, looking ahead 10 years, what do you see as the most significant impact quantum computing will have on ordinary people's lives? Pichai took a moment before answering. 10 years from now, I believe quantum computing will have its greatest impact in 3 areas that touch everyone's lives. He began. First, medicine, with treatments tailored to your specific genetic makeup, dramatically improving outcomes for cancer and other diseases. He held up 2 fingers. Second, climate solutions. Quantum simulations will help develop better batteries, more efficient solar cells, and carbon capture technologies we desperately need. And third, he continued, education will be transformed. Quantum computers will create learning experiences personalized to each student's unique way of understanding, helping everyone reach their full potential. Maria noticed something as he spoke. Throughout the interview, Pichai had maintained perfect composure. But now, talking about education, his eyes brightened with genuine excitement. You seem particularly passionate about education, she observed. It's personal for me, he admitted. I was fortunate to receive an education that changed my life completely. Technology can help extend that opportunity to every child, regardless of where they're born or their family's resources. As the segment neared its end, Maria realized something remarkable had happened. What began as an attempt to challenge a tech CEO had transformed into one of the most informative and inspiring interviews of her career. Unfortunately, we're out of time, she said reluctantly. Mr. Pichai, thank you for being so generous with your knowledge today. Thank you for the thoughtful questions, he replied. And thank you to everyone watching for your curiosity about this technology. As the camera panned out for the closing shot, Maria added something unplanned. And viewers, I want to acknowledge something. This interview didn't go as I expected. It became something much better, a reminder that sometimes our assumptions need to be challenged. The director's voice came through her earpiece. That was perfect. We're clear. As the on-air light turned off, the studio erupted in applause, something Maria had never witnessed after a tech segment. 1 month after the interview, Maria sat in her office staring at her computer screen in disbelief. The video of her conversation with Sundar Pichai had just passed 50 million views online, unprecedented numbers for a technology interview. More surprisingly, it had changed her career completely. You won't believe this, her producer Jake said, walking in with a coffee. 3 more universities want you to speak about technology journalism, and Google just confirmed Pichai's availability for that follow-up piece. Maria shook her head, still amazed by the aftermath. A 3-part series on the future of computing. Who would have thought? The day after the interview, clips had gone viral across every social platform. While some initial reactions focused on her dismissive laugh, the narrative quickly shifted to praise for how the conversation evolved into something meaningful. Technology educators were using segments in classrooms. Policymakers cited Pichai's ethical framework in congressional hearings on AI regulation. Oh, and this came for you, Jake said, handing her an envelope with Google's logo. Inside was a handwritten note from Pichai. Maria, thank you for one of the most thoughtful interviews I've ever experienced. Your willingness to move beyond initial assumptions created space for real dialogue. Would you consider visiting our quantum lab for a follow-up story? The team would be honored to show you the work in progress. Maria smiled, remembering how close she had come to sticking with her original confrontational approach. The experience had taught her something valuable about journalism itself. Her phone rang. It was her editor, Sarah. Maria, I just got off the phone with the network executives, Sarah said. They've greenlit your proposal for a new technology show. Beyond the Hype is officially happening. That's incredible, Maria replied, genuinely shocked. She had pitched the concept of a show that would explore technology with depth rather than sensationalism, but never expected it to be approved so quickly. They said your Pichai interview showed there's an audience for substantive tech coverage, Sarah continued. You start production next month. After hanging up, Maria walked to the window of her office. Below, New York City pulsed with activity. How many of those people had watched her interview? How many had changed their understanding of quantum computing because of it? Her assistant knocked on the door. Your car is here for the Columbia Journalism School talk. Maria gathered her notes. She had been invited to speak to journalism students about the Pichai interview, which was now being taught in media classes as an example of how to recover from a biased approach. In her presentation, titled When Being Wrong Makes for Better Journalism, Maria had written, I went into that interview planning to catch a tech CEO in a contradiction. Instead, I discovered something more valuable, the story of how technology might actually solve real human problems. My dismissive laugh became the beginning of my education, not the gotcha moment I had planned. As she walked to the elevator, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. Ms. Delano, this is James, the high school science teacher who called in during the Pichai interview. Wanted you to know that 3 of my students have since decided to study computer science in college. One girl said watching a reporter ask the questions she would have asked made her realize she belongs in this field too. Thank you for showing curiosity has no gender. Maria smiled as she stepped into the elevator. Her laugh at Sundar Pichai had gone viral for all the wrong reasons, but what followed had changed her perspective on technology, on journalism, and on her own approach to stories. The doors closed as she whispered to herself, sometimes being publicly wrong is the best thing that can happen to you. Outside Google headquarters in Mountain View, a sign had been put up in the lobby beside the main reception desk. It displayed a quote from Pichai's recent company-wide email. The questions we're asked often matter more than the answers we give. Let's build technology worthy of the world's curiosity.